Hey, you are at part 3 of this deep focus on the topic of the great Woody Shaw by the equally great Roy Campbell. I'm Mitch Goldman. I put this together on November 13th, 2013. I'm so glad I did. Roy Campbell, so generous and bright and sharp and informed and on it. Hard to believe looking back that it was less than 2 months before his passing. He left a ton of great music. Go and find some Roy Campbell recordings for yourself, and definitely some Woody Shaw, and enjoy this program. And if you do, come check us out at, you can subscribe to Deep Focus at iTunes and Google Play and Spotify and Podcast Republic, Podbean. You can go to mitchgoldman.podbean.com to see all the episodes and sign up and subscribe and maybe like us and tell a few folks and enjoy the program. It's part 3 of Roy Campbell on Woody Shaw from 2013 on Deep Focus.
At the same time, they were on the front line.
Yes.
At a certain point, and they recorded like 3 records on Prestige together. And Carter always used to call me Big Brother. I don't know why.
Now, I didn't know him, but I get the sense he was a character. He was a
very nice guy, man. Both of them were nice, man, you know. And Carter had a beautiful spirit, man, you know.
And he played with Woody for a long time, too.
Yeah.
And we're going to go to a town in Sweden called Kristianstad. The date is June 7th, 1978. June is a great time of year to be in Sweden.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. The days just last forever.
Forever, yeah. The sun don't set.
That's right. So that was what was going on. And great band that all these guys, once again, you know, that short list of people that were part of this quintet with Woody Shaw over the years, all these guys made many a date with Woody. And I'll toss names at you, and maybe if you want to say a little something about. On piano, Onaje Allen Gumbs.
Of course. I've known Onaje since the early 70s, and we've played together a few times, and he lives in Co-op City, and I see him every so often.
Right up the street. Mm-hmm. And great. He's a great pianist. He's a great arranger.
That's right.
He's a great record producer.
Sure. Yeah, and he does a lot of things with singers, too. He does arranging, and he's a music director for a lot of singers, record dates, and, you know, live performances.
Carter Jefferson.
And he has his own band also,
right.
too.
Yeah. Carter Jefferson, I didn't mention, he's playing tenor and soprano saxophones. Onaje on piano. Clint Houston is the bassist.
Yeah, I knew Clint from when he used to play with Charles Tolliver.
Yes.
Years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, that's when I first met him at the East, playing with Charles Tolliver.
Speaking of demanding music from trumpeters.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it's Victor Lewis on drums.
Yeah, cool.
So you've never heard this.
No, I haven't.
They've never heard this.
And I'm waiting to hear it.
All right. Come on. Let's get on the WKCR Express. And we are off to Kristianstad, Sweden, 1978. It's Deep Focus. I'm Mitch Goldman. We are listening to the music of Woody Shaw with the equally great Roy Campbell here in the studio. And this is Rassan's Run on WKCR. Mm-hmm. Not there, but there. Wow. It's funny. It sounded like a little club audience until the end there. It's kind of like the Europeans are all just like sitting on their hands till the very end. They just went crazy.
Yeah, Europeans are very attentive listeners, and it's really meditation and concentration for them when they hear music,
Yeah, no, they're in it, man. Especially, it's interesting. I want to hear about your experience of this. Let me take a big step backwards and say, you're listening to WKCR. I'm Mitch Goldman. Deep Focus is the program, and you're in the waning minutes, the waning moments of our show tonight on the subject of the great Woody Shaw, co-hosted by the great Roy Campbell. And Roy, the thing I was going to say, I don't know the city of Kristianstad where that show was. I've traveled around Sweden pretty broadly, but haven't spent a huge amount of time there. I'm guessing it's a smaller town, and I was going to ask you about your experience of audiences in smaller towns where maybe they don't get to hear this music quite as often compared to, so-called hipper places where the music's always living.
Well, when you go to a smaller town, people rarely come out, because they don't have the music there that often, and they're very enthusiastic, and when the concert ends, it doesn't end because their enthusiasm is there to greet you, and they will tell you how they feel.
That was Woody Shaw. We had callers saying, hey, what album is that from? No album. It's from the WKCR archives, as all the music you've heard tonight was. That one recorded, as we said, in Kristianstad, Sweden. And we heard Woody Shaw, of course, on trumpet. Carter Jefferson, who caught the eye and ear of Roy Campbell playing tenor and soprano saxophones. Onaje Allen Gumbs really bringing some color on piano. Clint Houston holding it down on bass and kicking some butt. I'm just going to say butt. Victor Lewis on the drums, driving that band, man, dropping bombs and just killing it. June 7th, 1978 in Kristianstad. And that one, the legend, people say Cheops?
Yeah, that's a mountain, yeah.
It's a reference to Egypt, I believe, right?
Right.
And one of Woody Shaw's great compositions. We started out with Rassan's Run, dedicated, of course, to Rassan Roland Kirk.
Yes. And then the land of Cheops is about Egypt.
Did I say Egypt? What
yeah.
did I say? I said Egypt. Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
I get a little punchy, man. We've been doing this for 3 hours. It has flown by, Roy. It has flown by, but that does not mean it has not taken its toll on my feeble brain and my voice. I'm done. I'm paws up, man.
It's a short time. It's a short time.
Flies by.
There's more Woody Shaw music, and I guess we'll do a part 2 one day.
We have got to do a part 2 because we didn't even we got to literally almost half of the recordings I pulled for the show, and I didn't even bring, as I said, sets 2 and 3 from that Keystone Corner gig. And all night, I have to thank you, Roy Campbell. You have been, as I said, you said right off the bat, you suggested Woody Shaw as a subject. I had no idea the intimacy you had with his music and the man himself, that you guys, a mutual admiration society. And you have really just brought so much insight about his sound and his creative process. I can't imagine anybody who could have brought him to life the way that you have. It's such a treat, man. I feel so lucky getting to sit here and do this with you.
Well, thank you, Mitch, and we have to thank Woody Shaw for blessing us to do this show and with his music and his spirit.
We do indeed. We do. And I want to remind the listeners that Roy Campbell's playing with Adam Lane this Saturday at the Firehouse in Brooklyn on Foster Avenue or Foster Street, Place, Foster.
I think it's Foster.
I used to live in Brooklyn. I don't even
Avenue or Street. I'm not sure.
You're a Bronx kid. What do you know about Brooklyn? It's the other side of the world, man.
Well, I used to live in Brooklyn, but not that part of Brooklyn.
I used to live in Brooklyn, and I don't know Foster.
I was in Bedford, Stuyvesant, and Clinton Hill, but I don't know that area of Brooklyn.
I don't either. But you're going to. On Saturday, you're going to, because you will be at the Firehouse. Friday, April 5th at Soto Velas with Other Dimensions.
That's April 5th. 5th, you're right.
and the following night, April 6th, at I-Beam in Brooklyn.
Right.
So come on out. Listen to Roy Campbell always. Go to roycampbellmusic.com, and people can order CDs there and find out more about what you're up to. And anything else we want to let the folks know about?
Well, Patricia Parker has an ongoing series. It's called the Revolving Music Series. And it's the first weekend of every month, starting on Friday nights till Sunday afternoons. And they even have Monday evening concerts. So it's 4 days, actually. That's my bad. So
nice.
From Friday to Mondays, at the first weekend every month. And Soto Velez Center is located, I think, 108 Suffolk Street.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Roy Campbell, thank you again for coming up. And
thank you, Mitch.
We're gonna do this again, man. We're gonna do this again. We got Woody, and then we got all those other trumpet players. I'm not even gonna mention that you were
Lee Morgan and Hannibal Marvin Peterson.
That's coming. That's coming. Oh man, a lot of good radio ahead. And we're gonna head out with the last track from that that set in Christianstadt that we were just listening to. And this last piece,
Theme for Maxine.
Anything you want to say about that in the minute and a half we have left?
That's dedicated to Woody's former wife.
The program is called Deep Focus. The radio station is WKCR FM New York. I'm Mitch Goldman, and heading out with Woody Shaw with Theme for Maxine. It's WKCR.